Hello and welcome to the EcoFest PhotoFest 2020. We've brought our event online this year and we're very excited to have lots of wonderful speakers here to make presentations. Be sure and check the tab under Raylynne Fillman where you will see not only this video that you're watching now but the slides that accompany it, as well as a link to register for the live panel that Raylynne will be a part of. You'll see the date and time information here under this tab. We're going to get started with Raylynne Fillman of Raylynne Fillman Photography on her presentation called Taming the Light. Raylynne, thank you so much for being here today.
Oh, thanks, April. I appreciate it. It's such an honor.
So Raylynne's going to go ahead and get started and share her screen, and we're going to watch her presentation. Take it away, Raylynne.
All right. Hey guys, my name is Raylynne Fillman, obviously from Raylynne Fillman Photography. I have done photography on and off for about, oh Lord, if I count, we're probably talking the better part of 12 years. So I started dabbling a little bit in when I attended A&M. I was a journalism major, and we had to take classes that pertained to basically the marketing of a small business. And so I took anything from poultry science straight up to, I had an elective and I really absolutely loved the idea of film photography. So for an entire semester, I got to spend half my life in a basement processing photos, and I just loved it. And I could only take black and whites. That's what we could process. So I learned a lot about light and how it affects your images. So with this Photo Fest being in conjunction with EcoFest, I figure there's a lot of y'all out there who are looking to take pictures of either people or objects out in nature, and light is going to be your biggest the biggest thing that you have to deal with when you're setting up your shots. So what you're looking for when you're going to be taking those images, what that looks like, and how it's going to affect the outcome. So I decided to put together a presentation called Taming the Light, and it really just hits on four main components of it. So here's my little intro screen. I should have popped to that a minute ago. I'm a small town Texas photographer with pretty big dreams. I eat way too much sugar and I drink way too much coffee. Just like I said earlier, it was solidified, my love for photography was solidified at A&M, where I learned how to do not only film, but digital as well. And if I'm not with my camera, you can find me hanging out with my family, drinking coffee. That's absolutely a fact, or I'm pretty much of an old soul. So anything that is old, sewing, weaving, crocheting, knitting and I don't get along, but it's something that I absolutely enjoy. So definitely a creative at heart. And I absolutely enjoy the product that I'm able to give a family once I get their pictures. Pictures are super special to me. When I was younger, my house burnt down. I lost a lot of pictures and memories, and so I just like to take those wherever I can. So first off, I want to share what's in my kit. So what do I pack along with me to a photo shoot or a session? I have a Canon 70D. I don't think that they make a 70D anymore. It's a little bit of an older style. I think the current comparable is a Canon 80. My two favorite lenses are going to be a 24-70 and a 50 millimeter, and they all have an f-stop that's a pretty large f-stop of a 2.8 or a 1.8. And that's very important when you're dealing in low light situations. You want your aperture to come way down. So having the versatility and the flexibility of those large apertures is primo. The next thing that I take along with me, just because you never know how lighting is going to go, is a Canon Speedlight. So I have an on-camera flash. It's a Canon Speedlight 430 EX2. It allows to bounce your light. So if you're working with a regular DSLR, the on-camera flash just pops up and that's all you have. If you've got a speed light or an external flash like this, you're able to move the light however you need it to suit the moment. One thing I forgot to list on here is I always pack a reflector. It's like 25 bucks, best thing hands down in your kit you will ever have. That is like the master light manipulator. So kind of just wanted to give you an overview of what I carry with me when I shoot. And now we're just going to hop straight into it. So when you're trying to tame light and make it usable in your photos, you want to look at 4 different things. You want to look at light quality. So what type of light you have, light quantity. So how much light you have, the temperature of your light, and the direction of your light. Those are the 4 main components when you're composing your the light of your shot. So quality, quantity, temperature, and direction. Those are huge, and if you can master those, then you can master a variety of lighting situations. So we're going to start out with light quantity. So your light quantity is how much light you actually have available for your shot. What type of light is it? Is it natural light? Is it flash? Indoor, outdoor? The quantity of light is really where you start to formulate how you're going to expose your image. So this is your starting point. If you're shooting at like high noon and there's no clouds and it's bright sun and it's direct, which is harsh light, you're going to want a pretty wide aperture with a high shutter speed and a very low ISO. And so what that means is your aperture is how much light your lens is going to let in. Your shutter speed is how quickly your camera will fire its shutter. So the lower the speed, the more light it lets in. Same thing with aperture. The smaller the number, the bigger the amount of light is let in. The bigger the number, the smaller the amount of light is let in. And then your ISO is how quickly your camera is going to react to that light setting. So if you, like I said, if you're shooting in the middle of the day, you want a pretty wide aperture and a very high shutter speed with a very low ISO. And then if you're wanting to freeze your motion in some low light, you want a high ISO. So you want to give your camera time to adapt to the light coming in. You're also going to want a very small aperture, which is going to make your aperture opening large. So you think the smaller the aperture, the larger the opening. So if you're in super low light, I'm going to show you an image. You're going to want to crank that aperture all the way down to a 2.8 or a 1.8 if you've got that capability. And then you want to kick up your shutter speed. Your shutter speed is how quickly it's going to respond to something. So if you've got sport photography, you're talking like 1/2000. If you're in low light situations and you're photographing something still, you want it to be, 1/60. Your shutter speed, you get a feel for it when you're photographing subjects and what they're doing. But the main thing is a sunny day, wide aperture, high shutter speed, low ISO. Low light situations where you want to freeze motion, you want to crank that ISO as much as you can without adding grain. That's the kicker with ISO. The higher your ISO, the more grain you're going to have in your shot. You can use grain artistically. It's up to you and how you want your final product to be. Your camera can absolutely do this for you, but it can also get it wrong. So there are huge benefits to shooting in manual mode. Huge benefits. You're able to manipulate your camera settings because your camera is going to say, yes, I can do this, but I'm going to do it the way that I know how to make it work. And it doesn't always give you the best result, which is why if you turn your camera on auto, your flash is going to pop up and it's going to give you some harsh lighting that you're like, I really didn't want that. Where you can combat that. You can combat it in 3 different options. You can either use manual mode, which is the best, or you can set it on aperture priority or shutter speed priority. which means that it's taking one of those triangular options off of your mind. And it kind of adjusts for that. So you want to make sure what you're looking at with your quantity of light, how much is available to you, and go from there. So the quantity of light is going to be your starting point. Now, when you're looking to measure your light, if you don't really know or you're not really quite sure, you can measure it. There's two different ways you can do that. There's an in-camera option, and then there's a handheld incident light meter. Your in-camera option is pretty good. I use it 99% of the time. I like it, but it's fickle. So if you're looking into your camera, you'll see that you've got like your exposure brackets at the very bottom. And it typically has up 3 degrees of exposure or down 3 degrees of exposure, and it's going to slide. And when you prepare to take your shot and you're looking at that and you're adjusting your settings based off of that light meter, your tilt of your camera or the exact direction of your lens is going to change the way that it views how much light is available. So one awesome way is to use the histogram. Once you master the histogram, it will show you how your colors are going to ebb and flow within your image, and you can get a pretty good idea of what that looks like. Or you can get a handheld incident light meter. That means that you're going to walk over wherever you're taking the image from, you're going to snap how much light's available, and it's going to kind of tell you where you need your settings to be. Totally doable. Either way is good. The histogram is going to be your best option for on camera. And using that little exposure meter underneath your image in your viewfinder is going to be an excellent place to start. So either one is going to be great. So once you know how much quantity of light you have, you're going to want to evaluate the quality of light and begin to formulate your exposure settings. So the quality of light is going to have a huge impact on how you set up your shot. So is it bright and sunny or is it overcast? I want you to read that. Bright and sunny means that you're going to have very harsh lights with very direct shadows and very distinct shadows, where overcast is going to act like a diffuser. The clouds are going to break up that sunlight, and it's going to allow the sun to fall evenly over your subject. Same thing here, direct sunlight or shade. Are you looking for those harsh lines, or can you put them somewhere a little bit softer? Right now, if I was to step out into my yard, I would have very harsh light coming in on me because of the way that the light is hitting, but I'm sitting underneath underneath the patio. And so it filters the light very beautifully and kind of casts softer shadows. Indoor and outdoor, your lighting temperature is very different between the two. If you're indoors, can you sit next to a window where you have a large diffusion of light coming in at you, or do you need to use artificial light? One thing that's really important to realize is when you're looking at the exposure settings, even though you can see well, our eyes are really good at adjusting in low light situations. And even though you can see well, your camera is going to struggle, which is where it becomes very important, especially in low light situations, that you know how to manipulate your camera and how to get the images that you want out of it. And I'm going to show you some of those a little bit later coming up. So if you look here, I've got 2 examples. I've got absolute perfect lighting. So the image on the left-hand side was taken at the golden hour, which is directly related to your sunsets and sunrises. So you've got your golden hour where the tones are warm. The sun is set a little bit lower to the atmosphere. The atmosphere allows for diffusion of that light. So you're going to notice the first thing, and then on the right-hand side, sorry, we're going to take a look at the right-hand side too. So the right-hand side, we have those soft shadows, we have the light that's diffused, but it is taken at extremely low light. So the image on the left-hand side was taken about the same time of year. And on the left-hand side, it was taken at about, I want to say about 6:45, where the one on the right was taken at about 7:45. These were taken in the fall, so if you know anything about the sunrise and sunsets, basically on the right-hand side, the sun had already set. There was hardly any available light, And then the sun on the left-hand side was still diffusing nicely through the atmosphere, gave me a good spread of light, and allowed for a lot of tones to come back into play. What I want for us to look at, though, is the difference. First thing that we look at is the ISO. So because on the left-hand side, my girls, the s'mores, they had this beautiful light that was abundant. We had a ton of available light still. On the right-hand side, I had no light. So I set my camera, that's me with my kiddo. This is right before we had our second kiddo, literally the night before. So I had to crank my ISO all the way up. And while you can't really see it here, if you were to blow it up large, there's a ton of grain in it. And you just kind of have to embrace that when you're in those kind of situations. The next you're going to notice is that my aperture on the left-hand side, I've got about a 4.5. So my aperture opening it's about a middle ground opening. So there's nothing really special or advantageous with that. I don't need it wide. I don't need it I don't need it all the way closed. I need it pretty open, but doesn't have to be wide open. On the right-hand side, my aperture was in 1.8. So I was taking this with a 50 millimeter, a 1.8 50 millimeter, and I would have killed to have a 1.4 just because it would have allowed a little bit more light in. And without a lot of available light, you have to open up that aperture very large and have your camera take in as much light as possible. You'll notice that the shutter speeds between both of them are exactly the same. So I was able to, I needed to crank up my shutter speed on the low light photo, but I wasn't able to because of the light availability. I could have structured my shot on the left-hand side a little bit different if I was capturing motion. If you're capturing motion, the lowest you ever want to be, ever, is going to be 1/100. Just because you're going to get some blur if not. But because the shots are both still, I had to have the same shutter speed for both items, even though the lighting situation is a little bit different. But my shutter speed is absolutely controlled by the lighting and the ISO. So my aperture and my ISO were the two most important things when I was looking at my low light situation, where on my great light situation, I have a lot more flexibility in where I need to be lighting wise. So you've heard me talk a little bit about light quality. So hard light and soft light. So hard light is going to give you a very sharp transition, very direct lines, and it's going to cast some very harsh shadows on your subject. Whereas soft light is going to be a slow and gradual transition. It's going to give you some soft shadows. You're going to have the light more evenly spread over your subject, and it's going to look more smooth. So this shot right here was taken at about 1 o'clock in the afternoon. Absolutely not a single cloud in the sky, and the sun is directly over my subject. This is where I used a reflector, because if I hadn't, you'll notice at the top of their heads, you begin to see a shadow come over the front of them. So because of how they were placed and posed, there's this entire shadow for the front of their body. So what I did in order to combat that is I took the reflector, I used a gold side of my reflector because I wanted warmer tones and a warmer feeling to combat that harsh light that tends to wash everything out. So I used a gold reflector in order to reflect the warmness of the light onto them, but that allowed the front of their body and their face to be lit up and visible. If not, it would have been kind of like where you see at their legs, where it was just dark and not at all appealing. Unfortunately, this is like the worst lighting situation. They were only available for this time. They really wanted some Christmas tree photos. So we did our best to make it work out in the middle of nowhere. Ideally, what you would want to do if you're shooting in an environment like this, you want to get what's called a scrim. And it's basically a really large piece of fabric that's held high in the air that allows the light to be diffused over your subjects to where it breaks up your light. So with the full, this is absolutely full sun, not a single cloud in the sky, no hope of diffusing any of that light. So now you're just working to combat it. I prefer to use a reflector instead of artificial light. You can also use a flash. You can aim it directly at them, which gives you a very close and specific light. And that kind of opens up the lighting situation as well. My next one is a beautiful overcast soft light. You'll notice how there's shadows, but they're not very harsh. Like even if you look underneath the truck where there should be shadows, there's really not this distinct cut from where the light is and where it isn't. It just kind of blends in together and just fades off into the background. So this image was taken around 3 o'clock on a cloudy day. It had a more even light. The light is abundant. It's just spread and diffused through the clouds. I forgot to include the ISO and shutter speeds and apertures of these, which I so should have. But they're probably taken, this one was probably taken at about a 3.0 aperture. I'm going to go with about an ISO, about 2, maybe 400. And then probably we're going to roll with a shutter speed of about 150, 160. That's kind of where I like to shoot. Whereas this shot right here was taken with like an ISO of 100. So I brought my ISO all the way down. My shutter speed was probably about 160. And then my aperture was pretty open. So I'm going to say probably around an F7, F6, F7. Just based off of the amount of detail I can see in the back. So your aperture is directly, one of the things that your aperture absolutely affects is going to be your depth of field. So how much blur or bokeh you get in the backdrop. So if you're in a high lighting situation and you want this creamy bokeh, you're going to have to adjust your ISO and your shutter speed to account for the openness of your aperture. The more open your aperture is, the more creamy and bokeh that background gets closer in your image. But that's a whole other topic for a whole different day. What you can do is, even if the lighting situation isn't ideal, you can manipulate the light quality. So there's 2 ways that a light source affects the quality of light. So you've got to think that the bigger the light source, the softer the light. The closer the light source, the softer the light. Those 2 things are paramount when it comes to how your light behaves. Now you may be thinking that, oh, but yeah, the sun is huge, so it's a really big light source and it's far away. But the problem is because it's so big and it's so far away, it becomes a very small light source, which seems counterintuitive, but it is. So different times of day have different results. So midday, the sun is overhead, you've got harsh shadows. So if you're looking for softer shadows in the middle of the day, try to find a shady area or like trees or something that can diffuse that light. If you're looking for those warm or cool tones, you're going to be looking in the early morning and the evening. You've got where your sun is near the horizon and therefore the light is softer. It travels through the atmosphere it travels through more atmosphere, and that atmosphere acts as a natural diffuser. A little bit later, I'm going to talk about the temperatures of the light, and when you take your shots are absolutely going to affect the temperature of the light as well. So you're wanting to catch those light sources bigger. So if you think about bigger and closer, if you're taking images with a flash, that light source is very small and it's very close. So it's going to be harder on your subject if you don't find a way to either deflect the light or diffuse the light. So here you are, you're in a pickle. You have to shoot midday. What are some things that you can do in order to combat that absolute harshness of light? So one of the big things you can do is diffuse the direct sunlight. Just like I said, even though you don't want to alter the light source, you can alter how it gets to your subject. So how is that harsh light coming in, and what are ways that you can change that? So you're wanting to create softer shadows on your subject. So how can you diffuse it? You can block it. That's huge. So like I said, use a shade, a building, a tree, anything that you can use to keep the light from hitting your subject harshly. If you're like me and you take your husband along with your shoots, you can bribe him to carry your reflector diffuser all in one, and you can make him stand there while he's got the big diffuser over your subjects. So that way you're in the middle of the field and you need to block some sunlight. Assistant to the rescue. Another thing that you can do is you can bring your shot inside. You can use the indirect light indoors. So maybe you come inside, you've got a big window, and that light may be coming down directly onto the building, but the light is filtering in an indirect manner over the window. So photographing in front of a large window, if it's still a little too harsh and you've got some curtains, just bring those curtains across. Add something that adds a little bit more to break the light up. Anything to break the light up is going to do you well in a harsh lighting situation. All right, so I've talked about it on and off as we've come through this, and it's the color temperature of light. So what affects the color temperature of light? Well, there's three things. You've got the time of day. Are you in sun or full shade? And the color of the object it hits. So for instance, even if you're in the shade, red light has a tendency to be harsh just in general. Primary yellow can be harsh in general. You've just kind of got to think about what that looks like and how it's going to reflect onto your subject. So if you are laying in the grass, some of that green light's going to bounce up onto your subject. Well, if they're laying in the grass, not if you're laying in the grass. If they're laying in the grass, some of that green light's going to bounce onto their face or wherever you're taking it. If you're taking it up against a brick red wall, that red is going to come onto them. So you're going to need to figure out some ways to balance it. Red is warm, yellow is warm. You can adjust it post-processing, but it's so much easier if you can just get it right straight out the gate and not have to worry about that. So the day in the life of color temperature. So I want you to think about what a day looks like and how the light comes in. So if you're thinking from morning to evening, you have got what is called orange light, then it goes to blue light, then it gradually turns to white, and then it goes back again. So you've got to think, first thing when the sun rises, that sun is coming up and it's got those beautiful orangey, purpley, pink tones that are just gorgeous. In the morning though, that time is very limited where you get that orange light. You've got maybe 30 minutes with orange light in the morning. And then it's going to start shifting to what is a blue light. So when you start seeing those purples come into the clouds, that's when your light begins to shift to that blue tone, which still makes for some gorgeous photos. And then you're going to get into this white light, and that white light is super harsh, not very appealing to anyone, and it's kind of a lot harder to shoot in. This is most of your day. Most of your day is going to be shot in white light, which is so not pretty. And that's why it's so important to figure out how to break up those lights. Then what begins to happen is it's going to go to that blue light, right? So right now, if you think about it, about 4 or 5 o'clock, you're starting to get that blue light. And then about from 5 to about 7:30 in the evening, you've got this gorgeous, just yellow, golden, beautiful light that's available to you. So I choose to take most of my portraits in the golden hour. It just comes up with a more appealing light, and it goes smoother across your subject's face. So once again, here we are. We've got the full sun, harsh light, just not very appealing. And unfortunately, this is the only time that they could get it. Then you've got this creaminess to this warm light. The white balance also has something to do with that. You can combat a little bit with that, but your light is huge. It's paramount when you're putting together the composition of your images. So with us, our white balance, we do it internally. Our eyes do it by themselves. We don't have to adjust settings, right? It just sees it that way. But our cams are going to need help. So different settings mean different white balance adjustments. So if you look in your camera on your menu, you've got this, most of the time it's set on AWB, which is balance. And if you look into those settings a little bit more, you're going to see that you'll probably have like a sun, a little building with some shade on it. You're going to see like fluorescent lights. You're going to see a couple of other things, and you're going to see a little K. You're going to be like, what the heck is this K? Well, that's the Kelvin scale. So it's measuring the temperature of light. I prefer to work in Kelvin, and the temperature of your image is absolutely going to matter. You might not think that it will, but it does, because the temperature of emotion, the temperature of your image evokes this emotion. So if you want it to be loving and warm and welcoming, you're gonna want those warmer temperatures in your images. If you're wanting something to be a little distant or lonely feeling, that coolness is going to be working in your favor. So what I've got are two images that were taken in the exact same photo shoot at about the same time. One, it was my little girl with Santa Claus, and this one right here is super warm. I used a gold reflector, or a silver reflector. I'm sorry. I used a silver reflector. This was shot at like 2 o'clock in the afternoon. But what is so important about this location is it's under a whole mess of trees. So even though that light is super harsh, I've got this beautiful setup in the middle of shade where the light is diffused. And I've got this little reflector that's bouncing up these warm lights onto them, which creates this warm, cuddly, welcoming feeling. We're going to hop over here, and I've got cold tones. Not at all warm, not at all kind of what you would want. The exposure is a wee bit off, but it's not that same cozy, warm feeling that you would have or you would want from an image like this, where it's so intimate and personal. So I prefer to shoot in warmer tones. So I adjust my white balance accordingly. And the Kelvin scale is an excellent way to adjust that on camera and not have to adjust that any at all during post-processing. When you use the preset settings like shade, sun, fluorescent light, you're still going to have to adjust it post-setting, just to kind of give you the feel. Whereas if you can master your Kelvin scale, you get it right off the bat, it's perfect, and you're setting it for the feel you want. So I would highly suggest getting out there, shooting in Kelvin, and getting comfortable with the coolness and warmness scale in your camera. Then last but not least is the direction of the light. So the direction of the light also has to deal with, is it harsh or is it soft? So the thing with light is that it moves in a straight line, right? And it starts at point A and it keeps going until one of three things happens. It either runs out. So you think like if you've got a really big flashlight and you're projecting it off into the distance, at some point that light's going to run out, right? It's not the sun, it's not that awesome, but at some point it's going to go away. So that's the first one. Then it can be interrupted. So something stops it, i.e. blocking it, right? Diffusing it, something to basically stop it from going to the next point, or it's going to reach point B. So it's going to either go until it runs out, it's going to be interrupted or diffused by something or blocked by something, or it's just going to get where it's going to go. And the great thing is you get to decide where you and your subject will be, right? So if you notice that the lighting is harsh, maybe turn them a little bit. Try to get the beautiful backlit glow and have the light coming from behind them. Does it look better if your light's coming from the side? Is it best to have it straight on? All of this goes into composing your image, right? And using light to the best of your ability. Also using it in your creative process, right? So if you're looking for those harsh tones, put them smack dab in broad daylight and see how you can use the light in order to evoke that emotion. So next question is, can you change the direction of your light? Absolutely, right? I bounce light all the time. It's pretty much like a ball, okay? As long as you've got something to bounce it off of, it's gonna bounce in the direction that you send it. So the angle that it hits an object impacts where it bounces to. Can you do it? Reflectors, reflector. Those things are like 25 bucks off of Amazon. Holy Moses. Mine's like a little 3-in-1. So it is a circle that's like much like those little car shades that you can fold in on itself. And you, on one side is silver. One, you can unzip it and flip it around and it's gold. And in the middle is this beautiful, large, round, scrim white diffuser. So I couldn't imagine my kit without it. Like I could even leave my flash at home some days, but I don't want to go to a session without my reflector, just because if you cannot manipulate your light and change it in order to get the shot that you want, then there's really no point. So understanding your light source, where it's coming from and how to move it, that's perfect. So one of my biggest tips is if it's golden hour and the sun is coming from the right, the left side of your subject isn't going to be lit very well. So what you're going to want to do is you're going to use that reflector on the left-hand side. That light's going to come in, it's going to bounce from the reflector, and it's going to go straight back to the other side of your subject, giving yourself a more evenly lit subject in order to capture that image. So reflectors, 25 bucks, best investment, hands down. All right, so these are my camera bag must-haves. So these are kind of ancillary items that I don't really like to leave home without. So I love my Manfrotto tripod. It is fantastic. It allows for a lot of movement and manipulation on how I need it to be. It's personally my favorite. The next one is going to be reflectors. Like I said, reflector. Like 25 bucks off of Amazon. Just do yourself a favor, just order one in. It'll make your life a whole lot easier. It also helps you learn how to play with light. Another thing that I get is a little card carrier. It's kind of like a little otter box for cards. I think mine holds 16 cards. And then that way, when you're switching out, you're not losing your cards. It's just a real easy pop it in, pop it out. And then a white balance card. So you're going to get like, it's a little hang tag and it's got gray and white and black. It's got like 3 or 4 different colors on it to where you can adjust your white balance to give you an accurate image. Those are absolutely must-haves. And that's about it, guys. Lighting is huge. Lighting is very important when you're composing your images, how you use it. You can absolutely find me on multiple platforms. I mainly hang out on Facebook. I'm not really great at the gram, but I'm working on it. And then my website as well. I'm available to book consultations. If you're wanting to learn a little bit more, we can absolutely set up things about how to work with your camera, how to use some of that. I'm available for sessions for your families. I travel if that's something that y'all need as well. But I absolutely enjoy what I do and would be more than willing to help y'all out. I'm going to have April link in the bottom of the little bio or on the page. I've got a little form if you want to fill out, give me your name, your email address. I'm going to send you some super cool cheat sheet options for you to keep folded up and put in your little bag where you go. That way, if you're stuck and you just don't know what to do, you've got some of those things. You'll also it'll add you into my list. So you'll get some updates about different tips, tricks, techniques, different things like that, different classes I have available, or different photo sessions that I have available. I'm working on putting together some styled shoots for photographers to come in and take. One specifically in October with a Halloween vibe, and some pumpkins and some smoke bombs. So if that's something you're interested in, I'd love for you to let me know, and then we can kind of go from there. But if you want to grab that cheat sheet, I promise I won't use your email to spam you with anything, but just to kind of give you some tips and tricks and some things to look out for, and some things that I may be doing or what's available here locally. So like I said, you can catch me on Facebook, Instagram. You can shoot me over an email or give me a call or a text. And then that's that. You can also visit my website that she'll have linked in the bio, and we'll go from there. So I want to thank y'all for taking the time to come and sit and listen to my talk on lighting and how it can affect your portraiture or your images and how your sessions or shoots can go. I absolutely enjoyed putting it together, and yeah, that's pretty much it.
Wow, that was fantastic, Raylynne. Thank you. Those are some beautiful, beautiful images. And I hope that those of you that are viewers today are able to take some great tips and tricks away from Raylynne's presentation today. I also want to be sure everyone knows that Raylynne Fillman will be live on our speaker panel on October 13th at 6 p.m. and she'll be in the panel entitled The Natural World. And her presentation goes perfectly well with two other presentations in our EcoFest side. Bill Wren with the McDonald Observatory, he speaks all about natural light and about dark skies and how that affects photography, as well as Jamie Smith Hainchy with Rising Sun Phoenix, who does nighttime kayaking and how you can take pictures in the nighttime and how light affects being out on the river. So these are perfect companion to what Raylynne was talking about with the importance of lighting. So be sure to tune in on the 13th. Your registration link is here under this same tab, the tab entitled Raylynne Fillman Photography. You can also download the slides, and you'll see under this tab every way that you could possibly contact Raylynne, including a link to the form that she mentioned. So Raylynne, again, thank you so much for participating in our Eco Photo Fest 2020. And to all of you that are watching, watch all of the other videos and be sure to join us for our different panels and our photo competition as well. Thanks, everyone. Thanks for watching.